Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. I got someone's underwear.
Robert Kennedy, thanks for taking a minute. Simple question.
Tucker,
It's good to see you. Listen,
You're a Bitcoin maximalist. You're Bitcoin forever.
I hate this central bank digital currency.
hey, I don't have all the answers, but together, I know we can find them.
Down in competition in the ratings tab for late night weekend viewers.
hey everybody, welcome to Rob Nelson Live. Happy Monday, post-Thanksgiving. Got my Legends Live Forever hat on. You know, we're going to talk about a couple legends here. Donald Trump may be a legend in the making. Elton John is a musical legend. I'm going to argue Joe Biden's going to be a legend for being the worst president ever. Isn't it funny that Nancy Pelosi talked about he should be on Mount Rushmore? And people actually bought it? It's like, really? I mean, even if he was a decent president, Mount Rushmore is a big, a big thing, right? You got to be up there with the greatest. Like, he's like Lincoln. Biden was nothing like Lincoln. Biden was nothing like any other president we've ever had. I think he officially, it's like the 32nd team in the NFL, the worst team out there. I think it's hard to argue that administration was anything other than an absolute train wreck, especially when you consider this, that his whole point was to come in and be the alternative to Trump, right? That was his strong selling point. You don't have to see me. I can be hiding in the basement. It ain't even so much about what I'm going to do, is that I'm not going to do what he did. 4 years later, he's back in office. So how did that work out? People liked your alternate to Trump so much that they reelected him, made him the only president ever to win an election, lose an election, and go on to win another one. The only president in history. There have been two-term presidents. There's never been a president who won, then lost, then won. Joe Biden's like a legend for making Donald Trump a legend. So that said, that's what causes this absolute insanity in people's heads about Trump. And I'm not saying everything he's doing is good. I've criticized him plenty on this show and will continue to where necessary. But those criticisms pale in comparison to, again, the bigger picture. A, what he's actually doing or trying to accomplish. And he ran on doing all these things. B, why people voted for him to do it. I mean, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party can take a bow because they are the reason Donald Trump got reelected. Donald Trump didn't get reelected, no matter what anybody tells you, because because people wanted him so badly. Because again, there are people who wanted him so badly, but he didn't win the election because there was just this craving to get him. Had you had a solid Democratic presidency, people would have been like, maybe we move forward here. The Biden administration, the Democratic Party, was such a train wreck for the 4 years he was in office, such a complete lie, shamble, whether it was on the economy, whether it was on immigration, just literally. Remember when they were like, the borders aren't open and people were flooding over it, like flooding over. You could see lines of people. People would be like, we got the call in Mexico. We got the call in Latin America. Come to America. Everything's free. They'll take care of you. They'll let you in. Just say you're an asylum seeker. And they just poured in. Oh, no, we're trying to keep the border safe and secure. No, they weren't. Donald Trump came in and shut the fucking border down. Like literally, nobody's coming in. Wasn't that hard to do? They set this all up. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, pretending it wasn't a disaster. You got people hanging off of planes like, get me out of here. You got U.S. service members being shot down on our own base. Afghanistan taking billions of dollars of U.S. weapons and technology that we left behind. And that's a successful withdrawal. And that's what they said. Remember, it was successful. Just like the economy was successful, just like COVID was successful, the vaccine was successful, everything was successful. It was so successful that people went back and elected the guy before that you won on the premise of, I'm going to replace the guy who's so dangerous and so bad, such a disaster, that they went back and elected him again. We'll take whatever chances come with it. Maybe he won't leave after 8 years. We'll get to that in a minute, after 4 years in this case, but that would be a total of 8. We'll get to that with Josh Brolin's comments on that. So I want to jump ahead for a second. It's going to be an interesting, perhaps slightly shorter show, but you know me, I say shorter and then I go longer. Go figure that out. So watching this whole thing with Venezuela, a lot is cooking here. So we've been shooting down the drug boats, which, as I said, may be an extrajudicial action, but at a certain point, this is what we've come to, right? It's sort of like Batman. Batman was extrajudicial action, right? Batman wasn't supposed to do what Batman did, right? He operated outside the justice system. He came in and applied his own justice. Now, he tended to try to not kill people, but it was Batman justice. It was like, you guys are bad. You're doing horrible things. The justice system isn't getting you. You're wreaking havoc on innocent people, like my parents, Bruce Wayne's parents, who somebody just gunned down in front of me, and I'm going to serve justice on you. And that's going to be the end of it. The Justice League's similar. Like, in some ways, at a certain point, you go, the system isn't stopping this from happening, right? The system isn't stopping drugs from pouring into our country. Deadly drugs, fentanyl, killing thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans, killing young people, making people addicts, hooking people. That's just pouring in. And the judicial system isn't stopping it. So at a certain point, Batman comes in and says, hey, I'll stop it. Well, that's what Trump did with Venezuela. See these little boats whizzing across the water with drug dealers carrying tons of drugs? Because you don't need a huge boat to carry a whole lot of drugs that are going to be deadly. You don't need to carry 3 tons of fentanyl in. We're whipping them across the water. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to see you in our little satellites. We're just going to drop a drone out there and just boom. Extrajudicial, 3 times is the charm. Maybe, but are you losing sleep over it? I'm not. You shouldn't be. You're a human rights activist. I wouldn't lose sleep over that. I'd lose sleep over the actual genuine human rights violations going on. Now, you might argue, well, this massive sweep up of scooping up people who are here illegally, not just the violent criminals, but people who built lives here, that seems like that's worth worrying about. Yeah, maybe that's a place for human rights activists to go. Yeah, maybe that's a good spot, right? You could pick a whole lot of places in the world where you need to look at human rights. Maybe you would look at the human rights abuses going on in Venezuela from Maduro, who's a ruthless dictator. Maybe you'd look at those. Maybe you'd look and go, most of the human rights abuses in the U.S. are not directed at U.S. citizens. We're pretty good to our own citizens. You might argue there's a broader human rights issue about livability, the Mandami argument. If you're not able to pay rent, pay bills, live a basic lifestyle, a decent, standard of living wage, etc., that's a human rights violation. Maybe healthcare, not having healthcare. People argue that's healthcare is a human right. I'm not going to argue these aren't valid things, but you want to talk about serious human rights violations. I'm sorry. Does Hamas come up on my radar? No, we like Hamas. They're good, right? From the river to the sea, we take care of all our people. Those fuckers are literally the biggest human rights violation out there. Backed by Iran, their backer, who's up there with them. China, pretty bad on the human rights. Russia, pretty bad on the human rights. Whole lot of countries pretty bad on the human rights. U.S., pretty good on the human rights. But that said, you want to pick something, go for it. But you're gonna remember they made their raft to die on. The guy, the domestic abuser whose wife literally said, "I'm scared for my life," and she went to court and was like, "He's beat the shit out of me multiple times, and I'm terrified." Now she changed her tune later. Who knows why? But nonetheless, that was real then. Oh, let's make a case for him. He's a good husband. He's a good father. Yeah, maybe moving human trafficking and beating the shit out of his wife, but he's a decent guy. Yeah, he's a gang member or ex-gang member, but he's a good guy. They picked the weirdest rafts to float on, to die on. So you're going to die on the Venezuelan drug dealers. This is an abuse of power. Donald Trump is attacking these innocent drug smugglers who are just innocently whipping across the water to bring tons of fentanyl into the U.S. to kill thousands and thousands of Americans. These poor souls are getting shot at. That's horrible. Extrajudicial. Let's look out for them. No. Well, most people don't buy it. Trump's blowing them up one after the other, and it's scaring them. They're scared. Who wants to get on those boats? It's like, man, they can see us from their satellites. We got a 50-50 shot at best to get into the other shore. I don't know. I want to do it. Maybe someone in the cartel's like, well, you're going to do it or we're going to kill you anyway. But all right, well, cut to, talk gets raised about, Trump makes his comment about Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed. Now, let me quick backstory what that means. When Trump says the Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed, this is not an act of him being like a monstrous totalitarian dictator like some knee-jerk reactionists might think. This is an act of him warning domestic commercial flights, stay out of Venezuelan airspace because we're going to be doing stuff and we don't want people to get killed. We don't want civilians to die. This is a very veiled and not so veiled warning to the airlines. Don't fly over Venezuela. Not because we're going to shoot you down, because we are going to be taking military action. And we don't want your planes in the sky with innocent people on them and something bad happens. So take a note from us. Wink, wink, nod, nod. You should consider Venezuelan airspace closed. Do not fly over it. This is not meant to punish Venezuela to be like, see, we're going to stop tourists from coming in. No. It's meant to literally tell the airlines, don't fly over Venezuela because there's going to be some military action going on, and you do not want your commercial airliner with 270 people getting stuck in the middle of that. That'll be 270 casualties. It should not happen. So people picked up on that. We're going, what is Trump planning? Well, Trump is planning a regime change. He is planning to get rid of Maduro and take out the drug cartel once and for all. Now, let's back up a second. Maduro is a ruthless dictator who has destroyed the Venezuelan economy. He's destroyed it. Venezuela 20 years ago even was one of the most prosperous. It was like the shining star of Latin America. It was one of the most prosperous, successful democracies. Its military was strong and vibrant. Its economy was booming. Maduro literally kicked the shit to the can. I mean, that's a phrase I just made up. Kick the can to the shit? I don't know. He destroyed it. And he basically came in, sucked the blood out of it, partnered up with the cartel, but in general with the Cartel de las Solas, which, and basically made a ton of money, paid off all the cronies, ran drugs, didn't give a fuck about the country. The Venezuelan military is, and we'll get to that in a second, is literally a joke. It was not huge to start with, but reports are that it's disabled. Like nothing's been maintained. They have Russian stuff more recently that's not great. They have U.S. stuff. When we gave Venezuela, sold Venezuela, and gave Venezuela arms, a long time ago, they never maintained. They're like, planes won't fly. Their ships won't sail. Nothing's maintained. It's all a wreck. Who does that? Who takes over a country and just lets your military just go to crap? Well, somebody who doesn't give a fuck about protecting the country, just taking money. Now, here's the proof of it. So Trump, this is all the setup what happened. Per the Miami Herald, Trump said he did. So it ain't just per the Miami Herald anymore. Trump gets on a phone call with Caracas, with the capital of Venezuela. Trump says he spoke to Maduro, probably did. And he says, here's the deal. We guarantee you safe passage out of Venezuela. You, your wife, Celia Flores, and your son. Guarantee. We won't hurt you. We won't capture you. It's basically like a plea deal. It's like an immunity if you tell us how to get the other guys. It's an immunity if you just give up power. You leave. Stop wrecking your country. And the Venezuelan people don't like Maduro. There are some that do, but let's not get it wrong here. It's not like he's a loved man, whatever. And they'll show pictures of him with his supporters, whatever. Sure. The vast majority of the Venezuelan people, a lot of them left who came to the States, to Europe over the years. People aren't happy. Their economy's been train wrecked. They're a joke. There's no human rights. There's no freedom of speech. People aren't happy with it. They're not. The only people making money are the rich elites and the cronies of Maduro. So they'd be happy to have him gone. We'd like him gone because it ain't good for the region. It ain't good for our relationships. We are a power that wants to maintain good relationships, and we don't really want these drugs coming in all the time. The drug cartel is basically the government. So, yep, bye-bye. But here's the deal, Maduro. You, your wife, your son, free passage out. We won't come after you. We won't try to find you. We won't try to get you. Go wherever you want to go. We'll make sure it's safe. You just resign immediately. Now, if you're Maduro and you care so much about your country, you just love Venezuela, you see him talk like his thing, the saber rattling, like we won't be intimidated by the Western imperialists. That is such an old, come on, man, get a new playbook. This is like Mike McCarthy, who's a Packers coach, was the Cowboys coach. They're playing the old playbook. It's why the Packers only went to one Super Bowl and won one Super Bowl. It's why the Cowboys were a train wreck under him. He's playing the old playbook. You got to move up a notch. You got to improve or, go like with the younger coaches, or the newer spirited coaches, the Dan Campbells, the Sean McDermotts, go, who are playing a new playbook. Maduro's playing the old playbook, the imperialist monsters. This is Castro, man. This is 1963, right? New era. Sorry, we're in 2025. No, Maduro didn't take a stand and go, fuck you. You won't get me out of this country alive. I've been watching the, American Revolution, Ken Burns documentary. Trust me, that thing will put you to sleep. Ken Burns, I swear to God. I remember, I'm old enough to have gone, in high school, grade school, we had to watch these things in the documentaries, whether it was about wildlife or politics or anything. They were so boring, you couldn't stay awake. So you remember nothing, right? Because it was just a monotone narrator. And then the lion charges through the bush where the unsuspecting, elk is waiting. The elk, surprised, turns and runs. It's like that, right? But it could do it about anything, right? They could do it about marijuana. Remember, you guys, you're younger than me. You don't remember, like, marijuana was like the killer thing, right? It's going to make everybody crazy. It's going to be like, You smoke a joint, you're a serial killer on the loose. They really ran that, right? And it'd be like, marijuana affects the central nervous system of people. It turns people into psychotic things. It's like everything's done in the drab way. It doesn't matter, animals, drugs. Heck, you could do a documentary on the circus and the high wire performers swing down on the trapeze, feet dangling, hands grasped on the thing. That's Ken Burns. Could you make the American Revolution any more boring? Try. Now, that said, brilliant information in there. If you can keep your eyelids open and cut through it all, it's a fascinating journey into stuff you wouldn't necessarily know about the American Revolution, about the Patriots. Sidebar. Now, this is a sidebar to a sidebar. So remember, we got to come back. We got to do the Trump weave and get back to where I started. So don't forget the starting point here, which is Maduro being offered free passage if he'll resign. So we took one sidebar. Now we're taking a double sidebar. So yeah, that's what we do here. I don't think we'll do a triple today. It's like a gymnast, you know. You do the how many? I don't even know what they call it. You do the triple thing. Boom, 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 boom. And you know, so bottom line, the American Revolution was so violent, and it wasn't just violent like the Americans, the patriots to the British. And those of you who don't know, they were called the Patriots, right? So when people call themselves patriots now, particularly on the right, you know, the MAGA supporters, patriots, they are referring back to that era, the original patriots. That's what they were called. They were called rebels, if you know, from the British, but they were the patriots here. But there were an enormous number of loyalists. Remember, everyone here was happy to be part of the British, you know, British Commonwealth. The founding fathers weren't initially trying to get rid of Britain and start a democracy. They were trying to protect their property rights and their income and their money and their power. And when Britain wouldn't let them, when Britain kept punishing them financially, taxing them, putting a standing army on US soil, which was British soil, but like we're British subjects, why do you have a standing army on top of us to like keep us in check if we what? They got pissed. And they pushed back. And Britain, the King James, was stupid about it. Well, he was stupid. He was the most powerful, you know, empire in the world. He didn't think this little uprising in the colonies would mount to much. I'll bring over 15,000 troops and put it to bed. He didn't count on who the American colonists were. But let me be clear. They weren't starting the revolution to have a revolution and start a democracy. As someone in the documentary says, a historian, they didn't try to make a democracy. The democracy made itself. They provided the conditions and it came there. They wanted to simply protect their property rights, their power, their independence. They would have happily made a deal with Britain and like been like, let's move forward now. You take your foot off our neck. Britain was like, no, we keep our foot right where we want it. And you do what we said. You're our loyal subjects. And they're like, well, fuck you. So we'll fight. And Britain thought, fine, we'll wipe you out. The Patriots were like, no, you won't. But remember, there's still half the colonies are loyalists, people who still believe in being British. They didn't want the foot on their neck either, but they don't want a declaration of independence. So you got the patriots and the loyalists. Those two fought like this, and the patriots, they were hard ass. Man, they'd go terrorize these people. They'd go get the loyalists, they'd beat them up, they'd kill them, they'd threaten them, they'd scare them, they'd burn their shit to the ground. I mean, it was violent. This was the first civil war within our own country, within the colonies. As we were becoming the United States of America, you had the loyalists and the patriots at each other's throats. And the patriots were more badass, but they were the Antifa, man. They were like, we are taking you out. The mobs would come in, mob rule. We will burn your shit down. We will stab you, kill you, threaten you, beat you up, scare you, chase you out. Like, it was bad. Forget about the violence between the British and the patriot troops. That was a sidebar, but it's how violent we are. We're a violent society. People will say, why is America so violent? Well, look at where we started. Okay, sidebar 3. The founding fathers weren't really interested initially, as I said, in a democracy, and they certainly weren't interested in extending it to everybody else. John Adams, who I've grown to love, I think he truly is the core of the revolution in many ways. Without him, there is no revolution, and he was the second American president. John Adams wrote, like, you don't want to not trust this democracy to women. And Abigail Adams was like the most powerful. Like, she is the first lady who was like a co-president. She's probably the only one. Then Hillary. And she was smart. She was sensitive. She was as smart as he was, and he trusted her with every decision. But he was like, women can't be part of this, and you can't have the working class, those workers, do it. This is meant for us elite property owner men to run. It was a republic with a limited democracy. They did, however, lay a roadmap that would let us build a beautiful democracy on top of it. And we've expanded those rights and things till 1920, whatever, for women to get suffrage, the right to vote, to 60s for black people, you know, I mean, and even then it was a two-tiered society, you know, so, but just to be clear, their premise wasn't to do this to start with. It happened. And their premise was to protect their own property and their own self-interest. Just keep that in mind, everybody, when you do your history. And, you know, that's where you could read Harold Zinn, A Revisionist History of America, and realize what he was talking about. Wrote it in the 70s. Lefty book, but I recommend conservatives read it as well. All right, that's my triple sidebar. I'm coming back to Maduro. Maduro doesn't go fuck you And the reason I made my first sidebar is give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry. The Patriots were ready to, once they committed, they were ready to die for it. Once they were in, they were in. They're like, we'll die before we'll back down. We will die. We won't lose our property. We won't lose our livelihoods. We will lose our slaves, because so many of them were slaveholders, which sucks, but it's a fact. Washington had like 350. And we will lose our lives before we will back down. So I'm Maduro. I'm like, you come into Venezuela and you kill me here before I leave my country. No, that's not what happened. No. What happened apparently was they had an impasse because Maduro wanted global amnesty. I don't even know how you give somebody global amnesty for all the crimes he and his group had committed. Okay, I'll leave. But I want amnesty worldwide so I can't get prosecuted for all the bad shit I did somewhere else. Prosecuted somewhere else for all the bad shit I did here. Wow. Well, that's a man. That's a Patrick Henry, George Washington, John Jay, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, after my own heart, Thomas Paine. Oh, you'll give me some perks? Okay, then forget the fight thing. No, Maduro isn't give me liberty or give me that. Doesn't give a fuck about Venezuela. So they said no. And then the second thing, he wanted to have his people retain control of the armed forces, which I guess is kind of what happened in Nicaragua in the early 90s. And in return for letting us keep control of the armed forces, and I get global amnesty for all my crimes, we'll allow free elections. Oh, I see. Okay. How free will those elections be when you control the military? I got a lot of faith in that. That's like having faith in Putin, like I'll stop shooting. Just give me what I want, right? I promise I'm not going to do a Putin sidebar because I don't have time, but I could address that later. Okay, just a quick sidebar. He might stop shooting, but it's only temporary. He's going to plan another attempt to do this and take more ground later. Ukraine knows that. That's why they're scared to give up territory that he doesn't already have in Donbass and stuff, and Crimea, but particularly Donbass, because it's like he'll just use it as a staging ground in a few years. Thus, the importance of security guarantees. So we make sure that he can't. And if he does, he'll pay a price. But that's a war to be fought later. Sidebar 2, George Washington understood better than most generals in history that his success was simply staying alive. His success wasn't dependent on winning. It was staying alive, live to fight another day. That's what George Washington was a genius at. And you'll get that if you can drag your eyelids through the entire Ken Burns documentary. Washington's genius was, I don't have to win. I just have to not lose. I don't need to beat Britain. I need to force Britain to not beat us. I need to wear them out, make them go home, and I don't have to win. I just got to survive. That is, to me, Ukraine. Zelensky doesn't have to win. He'll never beat Russia. He just has to not lose. So however you get Russia out, if that's a peace treaty and you give up a lot, fine, you live to fight another day. Okay, that was a double sidebar. I've done a triple sidebar and a double sidebar. Pretty good. And I still have about 4 or 5 minutes left. And then the final thing was timing. Maduro wouldn't resign immediately. And Trump was like, here's the deal. Free passage, you, your wife, your kid, get out of town. We won't come after you, and resign tomorrow. He didn't do it. So at that point, Saturday, Trump announced Venezuelan airspace should be considered, quote, closed in its entirety, meaning do not fly over it because we're coming in. Now, former Venezuelan diplomat Vanessa Newman said, I think the operations are going to start soon, like imminently, she said. And again, like I said, Venezuela, one of the strongest countries in Latin America, defections, corruption, sanctions, lack of maintenance. Its military is a joke. It'll last about 15 minutes against the U.S. And Cartel de los Soles is now a foreign terrorist organization. So, and by the way, the cartel took Venezuela as a main oil company. Those of you who think this is extrajudicial, they took the main oil company, which Venezuela's oil is where it made most of its money, and turned it into a money laundering operation, because they could use the company's international finance ability, ability to kind of get, use its connections to international banks to finance themselves. Eventually that ended, got sanctioned. But then they used Venezuelan jets to fly in the drugs. Pilots were making a fortune, and they were killing anybody who got in the way. It disappeared them. They used that, the government and whatever military they decided not to let this deteriorate to run a giant drug operation to Europe and us and poison everybody. So if you think Trump's wrong, think again. And by the way, the European Parliament, which is pretty lefty, pretty liberal, actually voted, I think last year, designating the Cartel de las Solas as a terrorist organization as well. So that said, I'm going to jump to the conclusion of all this. I'm going to skip over some stuff. We're going to skip over all my second tier things because we're going to stick to the big one here, which is how we see people. Then I'm going to have a little fun summary that gets you back to Trump, for those of you who love or hate him. George Clooney, who's 64, revealed that he almost got the role of JD in Thelma and Louise, the role Brad Pitt got. And JD was Pitt's breakout performance, right? He's the guy, right? And he hooks up with Gina Davis, who's the wife with a controlling husband, and she's on a woo woo woo, and Susan Sarandon's her buddy, and the end, right? Off the cliff, the car goes. But Clooney was pissed because he didn't get it. He was known in television. He hadn't done ER just yet. And Doug Ross, his ER character, becomes huge, but that's like 2 years later. But he said he didn't watch the movie for years because he was pissed that he didn't get the part, because he was like, that part could have gotten me out of being on TV, because he was doing TV work, and into film. And Brad Pitt, it launched his career. He's totally honest. He's like, I was fucking pissed. Now, he and Brad Pitt became friends. They did Ocean's 11, a handful of other movies. And admitted Brad was perfect for the role. But he said, it always pissed me off. He's like, I hate him because he got the part. So here's the best part. Gina Davis, right? Clooney's talking to her years later, and he says, I hate Brad Pitt. And she's like, no, you don't. He's a friend of yours, good friend. He's like, no, I hate him because he got the part. And she says, oh, did you want the part? To George Clooney. And he said, you couldn't tell when I auditioned with you? And she laughs and says, I don't remember you auditioning. My point here is, Gina Davis was the bigger actress at the time of Thelma and Louise than George Clooney. I guarantee you, a ton of people don't know who Gina Davis is. Everybody knows who George Clooney is. But at the time, he's auditioning to play this part that will seduce her in the movie, and she doesn't even remember he auditioned. And Brad Pitt, she said, didn't remember his name. When they asked who she liked, she said, pick the blonde one, because she said he was just so talented, so good at it. But she didn't remember either one of their names, and she didn't remember George Clooney ever auditioned. George Clooney, Brad Pitt, 150 times bigger than Gina Davis. This is how you have to see Trump. Nobody thought Trump would be the Brad Pitt or the George Clooney, but he became it. He became the superstar. And it's an interesting thing to keep in mind. I promise I'd bring Josh Brolin into it, because Josh Brolin, remember, wrote like Trump would be a disaster. He was like, he'd be the worst thing ever. And he said he's not scared of Trump because it's not who he is. He's like, I've known him a long time. And he's like, he's a genius at marketing. He understands what the general population's weaknesses are, and he fills it in, And he's like, I'm not scared, because even if he says he's not going to leave, he will. Which is interesting, because he said, I know a different guy, the Bill Maher thing. We don't have to worry Trump's going to stay forever. He's not George Washington going to do the noble thing and whatever, like do it for the good of the country, but he ain't staying. He'll leave. He's not going to be an emperor for life. Okay, and last thing before I go. But remember, be careful, because Trump's power is partly because nobody thought he'd be that guy. They mocked him in 2015 when he was going to run. They mocked him mercilessly. And remember the thing, and it was the award ceremony, and whoever it was, Seth Meyers, whoever said, please, Mr. President, please run, or Mr. Trump, please, heard you want to run for president, please do. And everybody laughs. It's like, please do, because then Hillary will win. Well, Trump doesn't forget that stuff. And now he's the guy. Now he's the Brad Pitt. Okay, last thing is, I'm going to wrap this up. This is not a full sidebar, but it might be a half sidebar. Elton John said, if Donald Trump wants to be remembered as the greatest president, one of the greatest of all time, which is interesting that Elton John's even going to put that out there. Now, he might just be trying to play up to Trump's ego, but he's saying he could be one of the greatest presidents of all time, which is interesting for someone like Elton John to admit. All he has to do is end AIDS. Now, I don't mean that facetiously, like all he has to do. AIDS is probably one of the diseases that could be ended in most people today's lifetimes, including older people's lifetimes. And, Elton John has the AIDS Foundation, and Lindsey Graham, for example, other Republicans have really supported it, right? We're no longer in the Ronald Reagan era where it was like ending AIDS is bad. It's gay people. We're going to look away from HIV. And Republican lawmakers are like, yeah, let's end AIDS. This is a scourge. Let's get rid of this. We've all accepted, gay people, whether you're Christian or not Christian, whatever, like it's part of life and it's all good. And, Scott Bessent, this Treasury Secretary, is openly gay. Like, it's like Republicans are like, yeah, let's end AIDS. And it's bipartisan. So Elton John's like, this is the only disease that can be cured in a lifetime. And Trump maybe solved the peace problem, he said. But if he wants to go down as one of the greatest presidents in history, if he ended AIDS, that would really be a feather in his cap. Interesting how these alliances will form. Trump has said we could end AIDS by 2030. I wonder if Trump's going to up the ante on that. And if he does, one of two things will happen. First of all, people will say he didn't do it, or I guess AIDS shouldn't have been a priority, should have ended cancer. Or a whole lot of people who would otherwise be on the lefty side of things will be, well, this guy ended AIDS. Maybe he will get my vote. Well, since he can't run a third time, maybe who's ever after him will. I'm not sure. That's it. This was the Sidebar Show. I'm Rob Nelson. Legends live forever. Be a legend in your own mind. I want to be a legend in my mind. And nobody else goes on Mount Rushmore, including Donald Trump. All right, have a good one. I will see you on Wednesday and Friday. And I think David Goxing is going to join me on Friday, so that'll be fun. We'll talk a lot about Bitcoin. All right, take care. Have a good night.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. I got someone's underwear.
Robert Kennedy, thanks for taking a minute. Simple question.
Tucker, it's good to see you. Listen,
You're a Bitcoin maximalist. You're Bitcoin forever.
I hate this central bank digital currency.